All right, welcome back to Daybreak, the show that brings what you need to think about as we begin the day. My name is Sam Gituku.
And my name is Nziki Piku. Even as we'd let you know what you need to think about the day, or rather the week as it starts on, we'd love to hear from you. Be part of this conversation that we're about to have here in studio. You can do so through our SMS line 22422, or you can simply tweet us directly at Citizen TV Kenya, at Sam Gituku, at Zinzi_K, at Willis Raburu.
I just learned that you have a lift.
No, what?
Zinzi has a lift.
Nakuana, you know, he's the one who shrubbed earlier, but I didn't do that to him. But it's okay.
No, it's a good condition. So in studio we have Anthony Oloch, Member of Parliament for Mathare. David Osiani, governance analyst. Karibu sana to studio. We're still expecting David Ocheng, Member of Parliament for Ugenya, as well as Senator of Meru, Mithika Linturi, to join us shortly. And as we do so, we want to begin with what's making headlines on the two dailies, that is the Standard and the Daily Nation. Of course, on that, excuse me, on the front page of the Standard, you'll see why Uhuru avoided route at the airport. This is a story that the DP has refuted on his Twitter account, saying that this is fake news. Of course, Standard claims that there was confusion as sources close to the presidency say Kenyatta gave his deputy a white bath in reaction excuse me, in reaction to statements by Dr. Ruto's allies at a rally on Friday. That's what is the headline story on the Standard. But also, other side, there's Waititu's big fight to remain in office. Last week's ruling by High Court that governors charged with economic crimes vacate office might spell doom for Kiambu boss and others being probed. I don't know whether they have any story
exactly
regards to Waititu on the Daily Nation.
Yes, in fact, it's what you will find on the Daily Nation. It is what will greet you probably right after you have discussed matters education, rather, the July pay for teachers. So let me begin from what you've talked about, Waititu. So the Daily Nation rather says, man under pressure, Waititu's moment of reckoning. Wanted in a corruption investigation, Kiambu Governor surrenders to police as politicians from the Kileweke function sensing up an opportunity to draw blood, tell him to pack his bags and to leave office. That story is on page 6 of this Daily newspaper. Real or fake, the 29 million Kenyan shillings, that's the average cost per kilometer for roads constructed by Mr. Waititu in Kiambu County, according to documents by the EACC. But even as we are discussing this issue of payment, what monies and what not, let me draw your attention to page 5. Pay us now, Kenyans, tells the dam farm. So a week after the police arrested the government officials within that 63 billion Kenyan shillings Arror and Kimwarer dam scandal, a huge row is simmering between the broke Italian farm,
I tell you.
Yes, CMC, which we have to talk about in a minute, and local creditors who have been asked to wait for 2 years to get their money. Here's the thing.
It's important to note that it's CMC Di Ravenna, so that you're not told that you said you spoke about another company.
CMC Di Ravenna. But CMC Di Ravenna, for them, they are being... The ruling will come from an Italian court. But how will that Italian court ruling affect us here in Kenya? Now, that story is on page 5. We'll discuss it in a bit. All
right, so we begin right there. And we've seen that action being taken, of course, seeing CS Henry Rotich in court, the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, as well as his Principal Secretary, Kamau Thuge. They've been taken to court, charged with that, several charges in regards to corruption, abuse of office, and several others. What, in your view, do you think we're finally getting somewhere in terms of the fight against graft, that now we have a governor in custody waiting to be taken to court? Or is it just another repeat of what has been happening? We take you to court, you given bail, you go back home, and then you're back to politics?
Well, I will state from the outset that if DPP and DCI, EACC bosses will not have achieved anything else, the one thing they will have achieved is to create deterrence. You know, in this country, we never fathomed, we never even imagined or envisaged the fact that a cabinet secretary for finance would be hounded to court, would spend time in the cells for a night or two. That alone has a massive effect in terms of trying to, you know, keep at bay possible, you know, looters and plunderers. I just hope that we are able to get a conviction. That will be the best example set. And beyond the conviction, I really hope and pray that we are able to reacquire some of these monies or assets that are proceeds of the loot we had. So we must laud the fight against corruption, which was one of the things that was signed up for
Right.
when Uhuru and Raila decided to have this handshake of building the bridges initiative. Among the 9 points that they agreed on was that there was need to vehemently fight graft. And so the steps taken so far are quite impressive. It didn't seem as such until, you know, Rotich was hounded to court, and Thuge and Susan, the PS, EACC. And when guys see some of these things, then they know it's not a joke.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a joke. So the replacement of the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury as well as the Principal Secretary, should the same be repeated at the governor's level, even as we wait to look at what Justice Mubin Ngugi had to say about the fate of county bosses?
That's another interesting thing, and you can trust Justice Mubin Ngugi. I mean, for the longest time, she has been at the center of trying to breathe life into our constitution, and for the time that I was practicing, especially public interest litigation and issues to do with constitution, she gave a lot of rulings and judgments in relations to Article 73, and that's a good place to begin with, because at Article 73 is where I think you would be benchmarking this in saying that, you know, leadership is a public trust, and so that trust is already breached when there is a threshold that has been achieved. You've been charged of something, and the court has said prima facie that you have a case to answer. You cannot continue to be holding office and discharging that trust when at the same time you're handling questions of having had improprieties and possibly breached that trust by getting into questionable dealings and issues to do with money. So I think as we approach this issue, the one thing that we need to navigate with, it's easier when you're dealing with appointive positions. Stepping aside is a concept that was done during Kibaki's time, and it was almost automatic that when you mentioned you step aside. I think Uhuru in his first term tried that, not with very good success, because the investigations then were kind of really very shallow. Everybody who ended up on that list either probably never ended up in court or got themselves out. But on this particular one, we now have a precedent where we will probably see that issue being followed up, and you know, Justice Mubin Ngugi's will probably end up haunting a lot of people. The question then is, for me, and I'm trying to act as a devil's advocate here, on elective positions, the question will be, how do you balance this with the right of the people who elected him, the voters, to representation? They voted for the governor, and there is a specific procedure for removal. That needs to be balanced against a possible scenario of witch hunt, where if you want a governor out, all you need to do is, and I hope the DCI
take them to court,
then doesn't go on that tangent, so that we have concrete information and concrete evidence and investigation, so that by the time you're taking a governor, you know that the consequence is not just the process of trial, but the people who elected him will not have the benefit of his service. Thirdly and lastly, this has to be tied to possible amendments in the law, where we have to determine corruption cases within a certain time. If you do these cases for 3 years, then what happens to the representation of the people?
All right, let's pick it up from there, but also allow me to introduce Honorable David Ochieng Ogenya, Member of Parliament. Thank you so much for your time this morning, sir. You have found us in the middle of a conversation about graft, but allow me to pick it up from what Honorable Oluoch talked about. During Kibaki's time, stepping aside was, you didn't think about it, it would happen. But why is it that this time round, be it governors, be it CSAs, why is it so difficult for Kenyan members of parliament, whether they are guilty or innocent, yes, to step aside, let investigations to be done until you are pronounced guilty or innocent? Why is that idea of stepping aside so difficult for politicians?
Thank you so much, and good morning. Stepping aside for me is a mongrel. It doesn't exist in law or anywhere. Even though it's under
Chapter 6?
No.
Integrity?
No, stepping aside is something that is foreign to law. Stepping aside should not be something that we should be talking about. We're talking about resignations.
Resignations?
Yes. Because what is stepping aside? That, you know, you're going to stay off for some 2, 3 months, 4 months, then you come back, so that you do what? It should be conscientious. It should be something that pricks you and tells you that, look, I've fallen short. I shouldn't be holding a public office. Yeah. So that I even want to advise the media, don't push the story of stepping aside it shouldn't be there. It should be about leaving office. There are so many people, Kenyans, who are morally upright, who could take up those positions.
We'll get back to that, but let's first take a look at what Mumbingogi, the Justice of the High Court, had to say in regards to governors who are found culpable, that the provisions of Section 66, subsection 6, 62, subsection 6, apart from obfuscating or make unclear, are against the national values and principles of governance and the principles of leadership and integrity, and undermine the prosecution of officers in the position of governor. In so doing, they entrench corruption and impunity. And she went ahead to say
that it continues, he is alleged to have exhibited moral moral turpitude, thank you, and he brackets conduct considered to be against community standards that requires that until his prosecution is complete, his access to the county government offices should be limited. Access to his office shall remain in force for the duration of this trial.
So let me ask you, so in line of that, because she's sort of referring to securing the integrity of an office, and you're saying that stepping aside does not exist in law, so exactly what should happen? Should a governor resign or just stay away from the office for the period of the trial? How should you do that?
The lady judge uses a very important word, moral turpitude. It's not legal. That's what I meant, that as a Kenyan who holds a public office, if your conduct is called into question, not because you slipped and failed somewhere, but because your actions have been proven to have fallen short because of investigations. You've not been convicted, yes, but you've been shown to have willfully decided to not to follow the law in a manner that the government that you preside over has lost money. So you're saying, what should be the bar? That all of us, assuming that all of us are going to be charged, so all of us are going to step aside? No. Kenyans must call upon their leaders and must hold their leaders upon a higher moral standard. If you are mentioned, it should have been an issue. I mean, you've seen this in South Korea, you've seen this in China, you've seen this in these emerging economies, where as soon as, even if it's a small matter, look, we got presidents and PMs who have resigned, not because they did anything wrong, but because their junior officer in a ministry failed to do something and something wrong happened to the citizens. It's not something touching on him. But here, we are not charging you because of something that happened down there, no. We are saying that something happened because of your own doing. And so in that case, in my opinion, I want to agree largely with the... I mean, if you look at that wording again, is alleged to have exhibited moral turpitude. I mean, you're acting in a manner that lowers your capacity to be seen to be doing the right thing in the eyes of the right thinking people. So I want to agree with the Honorable Oluwachi about one issue, which we in my opinion, I think, scat. In changing the law, we should this time around make it clear so that we are not even debating a judge's judgment. Clear that as soon as you are charged, then there's no stepping aside. You resign.
Even if it's elective office.
So that people know that their actions will be called to question. And that would then also put pressure on those who are going to charge, be it the EACC or DPP, that they must do the right thing. Because let me tell you today, in case the DPP or EACC was going to go on a witch hunt to make someone resign, then you'll see the public now fighting in DCI and DPP because of their shoddy work. So I think we must put pressure on all of us to do the right thing. I mean, I'm happy with what the President is doing, trying to put his foot on the fuel on this fight against corruption, and this can only be supported.
All right. So, gentlemen, let me draw your attention to story number 5, and that's where we began this conversation from, of the Daily Nation. Kenyan lenders of Italian firms to get paid. So it says a week after police arrested the government officials on that 63 billion Kenyan shillings Arror and Kimwarer dam scandal, a row is simmering between the broke Italian firm CMC di Ravenna and its local creditors, who will have to wait for 2 years before getting paid. Nevertheless, the company is saying that CMC rather owes about 210 billion Kenyan shillings to several firms across the globe. and the demand to be paid. And if the application is allowed, Kenyan farms will be at the mercy of an Italian court ruling. Honorable Oloch, we're seeing a lot of multi-agency coming in even with the fight of the corruption. Recently, the one that comes to my mind is FBI coming in to help. Now we're seeing outside courts having to be involved with what's happening here in Kenya. How does that strengthen or slow down this fight on corruption? Gigi, given this example of the Italian court, and how that ruling will then have to force Kenyan farms to pay to this company that has been mentioned in this Graft case.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that DCI has to deal with. I mean, it's not just enough for us to have taken to court the culprits. We have to also go back and question what was the project or development model that we adopted, and should we continue doing this? You've had people who, in support of the CS, have been saying that it is selective, that you're going against people at the projects in Kimwarer. They say that Itare also at the same issue. You have billions of shillings advanced to somebody in advance. They say they're secured by some kind of bank guarantee and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, we paid close to 11 billion, which we probably lose here. Somebody goes and says that they're bankrupt. So there are jurisdictional issues that I see here. How we are able to relate to those foreign countries and how we are able to secure the money that we got, and secondly, convictions and arrests in those foreign jurisdictions is an issue that we have to look at, both in terms of our law and their law and the cooperations that we have between the two countries.
Can a Kenyan court override a foreign court?
No, you have to look at it in terms of what bilateral laws we have in terms of cooperation, in terms of prosecutions and handling situations such as this one. But you will see, for example, let's take, for example, the Chicken Gate one. If you had the judgment that was upheld against the chicken people, there is, I think, within our laws, provisions that judgments that are enforced outside are capable of being enforced here. But if you look at it in terms of courts of concurrent jurisdictions in Kenya, one high court decision probably not necessarily binding but persuasive. Okay. So I would say that judgment should be persuasive to us. It is not binding. Okay. So that's around how.
But I want to say something on that before you leave it, please.
No, I'm not leaving it. I just want us to listen into what the DPP and the DCI had to say in regards to this matter. Then you can bring in Osiani on that if you have that clip.
May as well start preparing themselves, because more or less are going to be forthcoming. You can't come in and stop me. You can't stop me. Yeah, you can't. It's the first DPP I can say who is a polished field officer. He was an investigator in as much as was in the intelligence. He was an operational man. This guy has commanded in good operations, which even we did together.
And I think the president also has picked individuals who he believes can work together. If you look at the Inspector General, he's a colleague of mine. The EACC director was a former colleague. And we are able to sit down and agree. It was all on paper that prosecutors can guide investigations. That never happened. But since, me and Kinoti came into office, that has changed. Since Mbarak came in, the EACC, that has changed. Now we have teams of prosecutors and investigators working together.
That's the reason we say we are rejuvenated, we have been renewed, and more or less it's a renaissance as far as the DCI is concerned. Because now the DPP is part and parcel of us.
I have given instructions that all these corruption cases, when a hearing starts, it will be heard today, tomorrow, continuously until they are finished. Kwa hivyo naomba wananchi muwe na supra. If we send somebody to prison who has not been heard, that is already a miscarriage of justice.
All right, if it's not heard, it's miscarriage of justice. That's according to the Chief Justice. So he says that the cases have to be heard continuously. The DPP and the DCI are expressing quite a new level of confidence. So, Osene, as you look at this, do you trust in that? And bearing in mind how cases are handled in court, that there will be excuses from the defense as well as from the prosecution, is it a possibility that the case can be heard continuously without those interruptions?
I suppose it is a possibility. Let me first go back to Justice Ngugi's ruling, which I think we all support. And I concur with David to the extent that resignations should be actually anchored in law. That when we seek to change our constitution, some of the things we need to have very clearly, because the lacuna in law is why we have the crisis between Parliament and Senate right now. When Ngugi says that a governor should step aside from office until the investigation is concluded, and that's an elected leader, the question I've raised before, which I raise, is then how do we hold our members of parliament to account? Because then it would look discriminatory against governors when members of parliament also own and control a purse, on behalf of the citizens, but have no deputies. So in the event that you're able to demonstrate that a member of parliament has embezzled funds, how then do you deal with that? That is why I bet the proposal of resignation becomes the best proposal, but has to be anchored in law.
But how do you reconcile that with the concept of innocent till proven guilty? What if eventually you're found to have been innocent, yet you left office?
This is where then we have to agree. What then do you do to parliamentarians? Fine, well, let's agree that a governor has to step aside. What if the deputy also, because the deputy will be acting, he or she will not be substantive, cannot appoint another deputy, cannot appoint CECs. In the event that the deputy is part of the problem or is found to have been part of the original sin of the governor, after the governor is gone, the governor cannot come back, deputy is gone. What then happens? It has to be thought out a bit more clearly. And I support it because we increasingly need accountable political leaders. Right. Most of the elected leaders are not accountable. Back to the courts. I believe that if there is commitment right from the apex, from Maraga himself, down to the presidents of both the Court of Appeal and the High Courts, it is possible to see quicker and faster execution of these cases. I just hope that against the backdrop of the promotion of good judges like Ngugi, who now moves to the appellate court, we will get equally very robust and good judges at the lower courts, at the high courts. Because the anti-corruption court was assigned a few more judges in the recent past.
Right.
And they need to make a good account of themselves. Justice Maraga needs to demonstrate when he says that this will run quickly and fast so that we have quick convictions. Those who are guilty can be taken to jail. Those who are not guilty can be released. We need to see it in action.
Right. Honorable David Ochieng, let me rope you into the conversation. When we talk about innocent till proven guilty versus leaving the office, both of them, well, innocent till proven guilty is in our law. Leaving office is an issue of integrity, which is also in our constitution. Are we seeing an oxymoron within our laws when it comes to this fight of corruption? We're saying on one hand, you're innocent till proven guilty, but on the other side, our constitution under Chapter 6 is pushing for integrity, whether it looks like resignation or whether it looks like leaving office, whatever form that looks like. Is there an oxymoron within our laws?
Not quite, because our constitution tries to do something that is quite unique, and which is what I personally support. That constitution starts with something called the shared values and principles. What should bind us as a country and as a people? That leadership should be bestowed upon people who have some basic moral character, people who are able to understand what our constitution requires of them and behave that way. So that by the time, for example, as a member of parliament, I'm being accused of embezzling CDF, the process that have been gone through are such that there's a likelihood. And this happens a lot, by the way, if you, in the UK, in the US, before an elected person is taken to the courts, it takes a lot of work. I mean, we were dealing with a case recently in the US where there's a lot of evidence that Trump probably interfered with elections. But because these guys cannot get what they call the smoking gun, they cannot get the concrete evidence, no one takes action. And this is what I'm talking about here. That the reason, the values and principle, and then Chapter 6, is that we want to nurture a culture and a culture, what you can say, a living standard that anybody who holds public office will be held to that higher moral standard, not criminal standard, not civil standard, but that standard of leadership. So that we should not be talking about stepping aside or resignation or what. You're talking about saying, what I said earlier, that you as a public leader, you've fallen short of chapter 6 and you feel you've done so. We shouldn't be asking you to resign. You should say to yourself and say, Hapa, mimi mwenyewe nilikosea.
Right.
So that there's something I wanted to talk about before I just leave that position. The issue of the tailor and farmer guys not getting paid. And on the other side, our country saying that the debts we owe to the tailor and farm must be paid. Because I heard the other day someone saying that, you know, people who are owed in the Tari Dam and this one must be paid. Now, as soon as Kenyan government realized that some of these contracts are based on corruption, because let me tell you something today, we are paying a lot of money. Kenren, which happened before probably some of you were born, 86, 87, we're still paying money to it. Kenren, it was supposed to be a construction of a fertilizer factory in the country. It was never built, but we paid, every year we approve money in parliament to pay Kenren. Now, we have Goldenberg is still being paid. You probably know that Anglo-Leasing is also asking for money. So we must take a position as a country that as soon as a contract has been shown to have come out of an illegal contract and corruption, we should not. But then you'll find us in parliament saying pay. You'll find somebody going through the back door saying pay. Right. We should have some baseline. Don't pay as long as there's corruption involved in it, so that you can save money, because it will be useless for example to charge Rotich and Tuge. You charge them and then still continue effecting those contracts. I mean, there's a level at which a country which is sovereign can claim that because of corruption, this cannot be done.
Allow me to introduce the Senator from Meru County, who is just joining us, Honorable Mithika Linturi. Thank you so much for your time and making time to be here with us on Daybreak. You've just found us in the middle of a conversation around corruption and around graft. And right after, just when you walked in, we had played a short clip of CJ Maraga talking about how corrupt cases that involve graft should be continuously being heard and be listened to. Even with the current calling for a referendum, Third Way Alliance had also put one of the key things within their research, within their bill, that a certain time should not pass until for corrupt cases, whether it's 90 days, whether it's 3 months, etc. Do you think putting a timeline on these graft cases, even as CJ Maraga calls for the continuous hearing of these cases, that would help fight corruption when a timeline is put, a deadline of a certain case?
I think, let me say that I think that is one of probably ways of trying to expedite the hearing and dispensation of these corruption cases by setting timelines, just like you saw or you remember the past, that election petitions take forever, 5 years, one serves a term when it was not supposed to. And to cure that in effect that there was then, that aspect of fixing of timelines was found to be reasonable. So I think what Maraga is suggesting is, in my view, very good, to have timelines by which corruption cases should be handled and be dispensed with. And at the same time also ask him to also increase or set more courts, special courts, to hear these corruption cases. That will be able to really address some of the fears that most Kenyans have. But one thing I can tell you is that if the investigators, you know, the success of any case, whether criminal, whether in nature, whether a case of integrity or whatever it is, will seriously depend on the good work of the investigator that is doing or conducts an investigation. And I would even want to tell the Kenyans that Kenyans should not jump into condemning the judiciary when cases are probably dismissed, or the outcome out of the hearing of any case is not to the expected standards, because cases will be decided on facts and the evidence that is taken before a judge or a magistrate. And Kenyans must live to that fact. But that is also not to say that a few magistrates or judges are not probably corrupt. But since there is a judicial mechanism of addressing issues or cases where one is aggrieved or is not satisfied by a judicial decision, that gives us the comfort. But I personally want to urge Kenyans because I don't know whether anyone spoke about, and this is what happens when one comes late. And you see, even our agencies, the various agencies handling these cases or investigations, you know, also not immune, and they are not immune to corruption.
Right.
They are not immune to influence.
Okay.
And for that particular matter, we also need to be very careful because the heart aspect, and just I was coming in, I have heard somebody calling in, I don't know whether in any radio station, telling that, from Kapsaret, I've heard it was specifically from Kapsaret, and started wondering the kind of a country that we live in, that somebody is proposing that once you are arrested or you are charged with corruption, then you must stay indoors until the case is concluded. But I found it completely
but should you leave office?
Pardon?
Should you leave office? Once you mentioned, like now the governor of Kiambu, once he's taken to court, should he leave office?
You see, this thing, the ASECA Act, I think, as a provision of public officers leaving office once you are charged. It is a requirement in law that you need to leave office. And I think the conversation has been on whether state officers require to leave office once charged. You see, this one is something personally I would leave to one's conscience. Okay. I would leave to one's conscience because it's about integrity. And to me, integrity is what you do when you are not coerced, when nobody is seeing what you are doing, and it's about your faithfulness to whatever you do. But if, you see, the other day, Judge Tesmumbi Ngugi came up with a ruling that almost suggests that as a state officer, you need to leave office once charged. I think in the legal circles, this will elicit a lot of debate. Right. Because one thing, and I remember when I was in Parliament, I don't know whether Ochieng were there. Yes. I personally moved an amendment to the miscellaneous law amendment, I think to amend section 62, the ASECA Act, where was and proposed that any state officer with the executive authority was required to step aside once charged in court. That I did successfully in Parliament. But when this went for a presidential assent, it was returned with a memorandum. And the explanation... And the memorandum took the day? And the memorandum took the day? You see, that's one aspect of the legislature, of the executive trying to legislate through back doors, because when a memorandum goes back to Parliament, you require to garner 2/3 of the members of Parliament to veto what the president says. So when it came, we couldn't succeed. Right. But even right now, being the vice chair of the Legal Affairs Committee, at the Senate, because we had a month ago, the Attorney General, the DCI, the DPP appeared before a committee making similar proposals for us to amend the law to provide for what we are saying. And actually, it's like you want me to finish. Yes, because we need to take a short break. So it was. Let me try up. That was a serious issue that we had to discuss, and we asked them to make proposals and bring them to us for consideration. So the aspect of stepping aside or not is something I think that requires an individual to make choice. But I would also want to refer people to Article 182 of the Constitution of Kenya, because balancing the sovereignty will of the people against what an individual person thinks about and what Kenyans meant by giving power to the people, or power being exercised by elected representatives meant vis-a-vis this aspect of stepping aside when you are an elected state officer. Is what I'm saying will bring a lot of conversation, because under Article 182 also contemplates a situation where a governor may be charged but will not leave office unless convicted for a period more than 12 months.
Okay, all right.
It's a legal question.
We'll pick it up from there. Of course, you're getting developing news or stories now that there is an attack in the state of California. At least 3 confirmed after gunman opened fire at a food festival in Gilroy, that is California. The police are responding to that, and you have some live pictures from there. Of course, it is. They are calling it a mass shooting. There are scores injured so far. 3 confirmed dead. The developing story that we'll be looking at this morning.